Welcome back. This is the third video in the series on Solved Engine. Again, I'm Brad Ashley.
And I'm Scott Campbell, and Brad is taking me through how to use Engine. Now, Brad, in the first couple of videos, you showed me how to get the Engine, download it, install it. We got it all licensed up and ready to use, which is great. And now I need you to show me how to use it.
Yeah, so now we're going to start to talk about some of the real power of the processing engine here inside of Solved Engine. So we talked about the last time that all of the functions are housed here on the left. Again, depending on what you're looking for, you can open up these various headings and you'll see the tools that might be of interest to you. And also you can search up here at the top. I also made mention in the last video around the projection manager and that some of the tools do require projection. So let's look at one of those examples. So if we look at this projection change tool, here's an example of one that does require projections, obviously, since it's called projection change. And so we can see that it requires an input last file. It also requires an input projection and an output projection. So this would be used for someone who maybe has a data set in a projection that they're not happy with. They need to reproject it to a different projection. And so in this case, if I have questions or need information on how this works, I can click on the information button here on the left. It'll pop up and tell me more information about how that tool works and what inputs are required. But again, if I now have a list of projections and one of those is not the projection that I need, I can go up into the settings projection manager. It'll show me all of the projections I currently have access to, but I can always add an additional projection. I can search by an EPSG code or a general text string. I also can search by proj4 string if you've got that already. And then you can always do additional parameters to make your custom projection available. So once you've set up that and hit save, it'll be in your list.
Yeah, that's pretty important. I mean, if you're not in the right projection system, yeah, you could be in some pretty big trouble there with the rest of your processing.
Yeah, so now let me walk you through kind of a general use case of the application. So some of the regular tools that people use are maybe they have multiple types of or multiple files of last files that they want to combine into one. And so as you can see, as I find these tools, I simply click and it pops into the operation. So this first tool is combining multiple last files, and then there'll be an output file. So I can set that input file. I'll find some sample data here on my desktop and select that folder. I can also select the output folder. So maybe I want to call this results and select that folder. And now, not likely is that the only thing that I want to work with the data. I probably want to do something else next. So let's go ground filter. So we're now going to do a ground filter basic. That's one of our tools. This one requires a little bit of input. So again, if you have any questions about that input file, you can always click on the information button. It'll pop up and ask you or show you more information about what you need to know. And then we'll also maybe want to do a noise filter. So this is the noise filter multipass. This is really good for our mobile scanning folks. You've got multiple collections on the same location, but you've got people walking through, cars, etc. Just general noise that you want to remove that isn't static in the frames. And so that's a third operation. So now what you might be noticing is that each of these tools have some arrows pointing out of the sides. And what that does is it allows us to actually connect these together, and we can make this into what we call a workflow. So we now have a combined last. We have multiple last files that we want to run and put together. We now have a ground filter basic that we want to run and a noise filter multipass. And I can put all of the parameters in, units, etc. But once we're happy with this workflow, down here on the bottom left, we can hit save configuration. We can now call this, maybe it's noise filter. We can save that. And now in the future, if we have a similar data set that we want to be able to run with similar operations, we can actually load that same file. You'll see it there and it'll pop up and you can load and run the exact same workflow. So this really is important for saving time but ultimately for repeatability on the same types of data.
Now, I'm assuming in this workflow, Brad, from operation to operation 3, sorry, you picked the first output 3DP, but depending on what I wanted, I could have picked maybe one of the other ones too, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can always, if you want to run it on some other data set, or maybe you
Like
don't
ground
even,
things or ground data or object data or something like that. You could pick something like that.
that's right. And if you don't even want these data sets, you can always turn them off. So maybe you don't even care to have the thinned version or the ground data specifically. You're really looking for that end result noise multipass. You can turn those off entirely. And this internal file, the 3DP file, which is a solved format, it will run through and keep true. The other thing that I'll note here, and I will have to just make some quick inputs here. Once I put in my input files, I can hit execute.
Well, that's a good point. So the workflow, it'll come back and tell you if you've missed something, right?
That's right. It'll actually show you an error if there's any errors on, of missing information. So once you've done that, it'll confirm the workflow. And one thing to note is that we also, all of our tools can be run in the command line instead of here in the engine application itself. So if you open up these arrows on the side here, it'll show you what that command line prompt is to allow you to actually run that tool in the back end.
Well, I could see that being really useful. Like if I've got some programmers and they programmed up an application, or if I wanted to call it from another application, this is the command that I would use to call engine and run that process that we just created.
That's right. The last thing I want to show you just here in the operations side is maybe I don't want to combine all those last files that I first dealt with. Maybe I have 10 or 20 last files and I want to keep them separate, but I want to run the ground filter and the noise filter on all 10, but I don't want to run them individually. So in that case, I'm going to get rid of that combine last, and I'm going to use this batch mode. So by running batch mode, it lets me input a directory of last files as opposed to that one individual last that would have came out of combine. I can still stream these together, but in this case, the output will be 10 individual noise filter multipass files as opposed to one individual had I put them together in the beginning.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that, let's say I've got a couple of hundred last files. I could choose to combine them and then run these next two steps, or I could run these next two steps on each of those files individually.
That's right.
Okay, this is pretty cool, Brad. I've learned a lot about how, and the gray and white bars now make sense to me, and how these things fit together makes a lot of sense. And I really like the fact that I can save it and load it again, which is going to save me a ton of time, or that I can call it command line from another application. That's really, really cool. I'm really interested in the viewing and the sharing. So maybe what we should do is head over to another video, and you can show me how to use the viewer and how I can use it to share some data with my clients.
Sounds great.